PanEpisteme, which means knowing everything.
Which means combining all the different disciplines of knowledge, having an all-round education, and finding the emergence that arises from the combination of interdisciplinarity.
And also, academy is related with PanEpisteme.
It's a very interesting idea, academia, and it's a very interesting word because it literally comes after the word ekas, which means far away, and demos, which is the root syllable, the root word of democracy as well. So it's a community that is somewhere far away. I mean, that could be taken literally, far away from the city, from the agora, from the mundane, let's say, everyday aspects, of life. But then it has also a symbolic meaning because Academos was a hero in ancient Greece. So it's this idea that that community of knowledge deals with aspects that are not just of the five senses, right? They relate to something that seems to be further away from our senses, farther away from our senses. Hence, ekas and demos.
We don't need individualism in the leadership of academy anymore. We need somehow more to recover the fun of knowing together and being collectively dealing with things that we love and we brings us knowledge. So
yeah, that's the idea of demos, of community.
So what do we mean and how can we navigate through all this new wave of panpsychism?
Panpsychism has a very long history. It emerges in many different ancient civilizations, and especially we encounter it in ancient Hellenic philosophy, in the pre-Socratics, and Pythagoras. So panpsychism is a worldview, is a way of understanding the emergence of the world, the big questions of cosmology, and the mysteries of life. And this theory doesn't really say that a rock has thoughts or feelings the way we human beings do, but rather it's a worldview that sees consciousness as one of the basic qualities or building blocks of reality, such as atoms, electrons, quarks. And it states that all those building blocks of reality might have some form of proto-consciousness. So the idea is that those forms of building blocks of materiality emerge out of consciousness. That's how and why they're imbued by that element of psyche, animus, or consciousness, nous. We can say that panpsychism is very, very relevant to modern debates and discussions around the issue of the origin of the world and consciousness, because it's really an attempt to address the hard problem of consciousness. How does our subjective conscious experience arise from physical processes? What's your perspective as a physicist?
Well, honestly, I find it intriguing, but also slippery. For example, we replace the hard problem of consciousness with the hard problem of matter. How does on Earth matter appears out of pure consciousness? How objective experience arises from subjective experience? So I think that another merit of panpsychism is to help us break this divide and make a more holistic understanding of both. Maybe they are the same thing, so nothing emerges from nothing, or everything emerges from everything. So it is slippery because if I put my physics hat, physics is all about measurable properties. We have been in this cage since Galileo tried to avoid the fate of Bruno and start saying, I don't care about theology, I only care about mass, charge. Then we found out spin and other things, exotic stuff like quarks, color and exotic and beauty and all that. So these are kind of objective realities, mathematized and ready to be measured and tested. So how would you test panpsychism?
So testing panpsychism is a huge challenge. But consider this, materialist approaches also struggle to explain subjective experience. The idea that consciousness emerges from purely physical processes isn't exactly proven either. Panpsychism, as you mentioned, flips the script by suggesting that consciousness isn't something that emerges, but is instead a fundamental aspect of the universe, just as I said before, like space, time, and energy. Also, when it comes to quantities and quantification as a method of validation, then philosophy comes in and says that just because at some point in the history of physics, science, what we call intellectual history, and you mentioned very tangible motives for that, quantification emerged as the dominant way of verifiability, it doesn't mean that it's necessarily the only one. Because, I mean, if we go back to Aristotle, quantity is just one of the 10 categories that we use to know things. One other of those 10 categories is quality. And quality is precisely quality because ipso facto, it's not a quantity. It cannot be quantifiable. So many things in our everyday lives, so many of our experiences are not really quantifiable because they do not belong in the house, in the realm of quantification. So panpsychism can also be taken as an invitation to transcend the narrow-mindedness of quantities, measures, quantifiable factors, and open up to the possibility that there can be verification in a completely different way, in a qualitative way.
Of course, the validation principle cannot be validated and the falsification principle cannot be falsified. So these are kind of the dogmas of modern science saying that we need a fair, objective validation, or falsification method, which has to do with objectification. I mean, you have to create, but if things are not objects, or they don't have an objectifiable validation, so to speak, we cannot find a common ground. How am I about to measure your feelings if there's no meter that can point to someone and say that he's sad that much or he has joy of that much? It is something we have to take into account with a different way in order to understand, as you say, further what this is all about. So the idea of panpsychism and its testing, it is a huge challenge. You see, I remember the physics courses when you could not make up something for electromagnetism out of purely mechanical quantities, then people invent the spin, the electrical charge, and then they could not find out. And this we say it's irreducible. The spin again. This is irreducible. It's not like angular momentum. It looks like it, but it's irreducible quantity. And we keep on putting more and more irreducible quantities in the elementary particles, and they have a model which say, okay, this is it. We have found everything. There are daring approaches now from physicists that they are panpsychism, and in my mind is Federico Fagin and Stuart Kauffman, but many others also. But these are the two recent publications that they claim and they force the idea that consciousness is irreducible, not measurable, not physical, but irreducible. How that can you fit that into the panpsychism?
I'm thinking as a philosopher, right? So how can any of those physicists say that their ontological experience can be described in terms of quantities? Like our ontological experience itself, our conscious experience, our awareness, our emotions, love, goals, achieving, desiring, all that rich spectrum that makes up our experience of life cannot be in itself quantified. We can try to quantify it, but if somebody came up to us and said, okay, so your life is 50 units of low vibration and 50 units of that, and it's an abstraction from the experience. It's just an abstraction. It cannot describe that experience of being alive, of being aware, of being here now. So the reason why quantification cannot capture ontology and ontological experience is because there are other categories of ontology further to quantity, and quality, for instance, is one of them. And quantification is reducible, it's breaking up little boxes and units, but then there are qualities and things that are irreducible, like love, like knowing, like consciousness. So yeah, I like the way you frame it, and it's very nice because I think it moves us from the realm of divisibility to that realm of indivisibility.